Hey y'all, it's Dawn, and I'm so glad you're back. I've got another fun, budget-friendly DIY video for you today. For this project, I used 2 empty pill bottles and filled them about halfway with some rice to give them some weight. You can use anything you have on hand for this: sand, dirt, rocks, beans, anything that will give the bottle some weight. For the first gnome, I used this Valentine's Day knee-length sock I got from Dollar Tree. I put the pill bottle into the sock and then gathered the sock at the top and tied it with a piece of string and cut it off. I then cut the band off of the top of the sock and put it to the side. I purchased this scarf because I thought it'd be great for making gnome beards and hair. I cut some of the yarn off. I tied both ends with a smaller piece of yarn and then cut it in the middle to give me 2 pieces. I will be using this for the girl gnome as her hair. I cut the top part of the sock off and slid it onto the pill bottle. I placed the yarn under each side of the hat and made a simple braid on each side. I used a piece of the sock to tie the braids at the end, and then used a brush to brush out the ends of the braid. I glued the braids into place and placed the hat back on the pill bottle. I tied the top of the hat with another piece of string. And then used a small white bead for the nose. And just look at how adorable she is. For the boy gnome, I covered the pill bottle with a black kid sock and cut another knee-length Valentine's Day sock right above the heel. I placed the upper part of the sock on the pill bottle for the hat. I used a paper towel to add some volume to his hat and tied the end with another piece of string. I cut more of the scarf off for his beard and cut a small strip of cardstock to glue the yarn to. I have found this is easier than gluing the yarn directly onto the sock of the gnome. After I had the yarn glued down, I used a small hairbrush to brush the beard out and make it more fluffy. I glued the beard onto the pill bottle and continued brushing and trimming the beard until I was happy with the way it looked. I used another small white bead for his nose and glued it to the middle of the beard. I then pulled the hat down and glued it on both sides of the nose because it kept wanting to roll up. I think these gnomes are my favorite. They are so stinking cute. I used a clear jar from Dollar Tree. The jar actually came with seashells in it. I poured them out to use for another project later. I took the jar outside and spray painted it pink. I found this SVG file on Design Bundles. After sizing, cutting, and weeding the vinyl, I applied it to the jar using transfer paper. I used these little heart picks from Dollar Tree and cut them down. I decided to add ribbon to each of them. I got this ribbon in the baby shower section at Dollar Tree. I thought it would be perfect for Valentine's decor. I tied a simple bow and then glued them to the stick of each heart. I used a piece of white string and wrapped it around the neck of the jar and tied it in the back. I used various pieces of sprigs, cut them down to size, and placed them around the hearts to complete the look. And just look how sweet the little bottle turned out. For the sign, I used a wooden 4" by 4" coaster I got from Hobby Lobby. I painted the coaster with ivory chalk paint and used my hot air gun to dry it. I used this red burlap wired ribbon and cut the wired sides off. I laid the burlap on the wood and began cutting it down to size. I then painted the burlap and coaster with matte Mod Podge. Mod Podge will dry completely clear and hold the burlap onto the wood. After the Mod Podge had dried, it was time to apply the vinyl. After applying the vinyl to transfer paper, I applied it to the burlap on the wood. This was a little tricky because the vinyl didn't want to stick to the burlap. I was finally able to get the transfer tape off with all the letters staying in place. I used a thin piece of fabric and my iron to secure the vinyl to the burlap. And just look at how stinking cute. I found this Dollar Tree frame in my stash. I took the paper heart out of the frame and I picked up these 3 gift bags on my weekly trip to Dollar Tree and decided to use the gift bag with the heart and stripes. I cut the bag open and removed the handle from the side. I folded the heart that came with the frame in half so I could try to center it on the gift bag heart. I then laid half of the heart on the gift bag and centered it. Then I simply traced around it with a pencil, lined it up on the other side, and traced it again to complete the heart I was going to cut. I used my scissors and cut on the line I had just traced out. I laid the cut onto the frame and had to make some adjustments to get it to fit right. I trimmed the heart where I thought it needed it and continued doing this until it finally fit. I placed the paper heart into the frame to make sure everything looked good. I removed everything from the frame and painted it with white chalk paint. Once the paint had dried, I placed the gift bag heart back in the frame and put a dab of glue around the edge of it to hold it in place. I closed the back off with the little black things and put a dab of glue in the hole at the bottom and inserted the stick that came with the frame. I did this so the frame would stand on its own. If you want the frame to hang, just don't put the stick on it. I used some black and white ribbon and glued it around the edge of the entire frame. I used my scissors to remove the excess ribbon. I used a piece of twine and folded it in half to create the bow at the top. I still seem to be having trouble with bows, but I think I'm getting a little bit better. Once the bow was finished, I put a dab of glue on the back and placed it on the top center of the frame. And just look at how stinking cute this gift bag sign turned out. I used this Dollar Tree heart-shaped wreath form. I first tried to cut the wire frame with some wire cutters, but that just didn't work. So I took the frame outside and decided to try using my Dremel tool to cut the wire. I placed a metal cutter on it and began working on the metal, and that worked perfectly. It was so much easier than trying to use the wire clippers. Now that I had the smaller heart cut out of the wreath, I needed to smooth it out so the beads would fit onto it. I simply used the Dremel tool and removed the sharp edges from where I had cut the smaller wreath off of the larger one. I also cut the wire in half so I could put the beads on the wreath. I took the wire wreath back inside to string the beads. I used a pair of pliers to straighten the top of the heart so I could slide the beads onto both sides of the wreath form more easily. I used 18mm, 20mm, and 25mm beads to complete the wreath. At the bottom of the heart, I placed two 16mm beads, one on each side of the heart. Next, I placed four 20mm beads on each side. Next was four 25mm beads on each side. I then started going smaller with the beads. Four 20mm beads. And I then used two 16mm beads on each side. I used my pliers again to turn the heart back up where I had straightened it earlier and placed another two 16mm beads to finish it off. This was a little tricky because the beads kept wanting to slide off the wreath. placed hot glue inside the last bead and fed the little bit of metal I had left into the last bead and hot glued all of it together. I used a piece of burlap ribbon to create the hanger. After cutting it to the length I wanted, I folded it in half and sealed it with a small line of hot glue. I then used hot glue again and glued the burlap into place on the middle bead. I already loved the way the wreath was turning out, simple and elegant. But to finish the wreath off, I used 2 pieces of lamb's ear and hot glued them under the burlap ribbon. I made a small bow and glued it to the top. This beautiful heart wreath can be used year-round because I used neutral colors. I think I will be making a larger one next time. I used one of the Dollar Tree chalkboards in this cut file from Design Bundles to create an adorable little Valentine's sign. After sizing the file in Design Space, I weeded and applied it to transfer paper. I had some problems with the vinyl sticking to the chalkboard. I used my iron on the area of the vinyl that didn't want to stick, and it worked great. After removing the transfer paper, I placed a thin piece of cloth on top and ironed it again just to make sure all of the vinyl was stuck well. I found this cute X and O ribbon in my stash and used it at the top of the chalkboard just to give it a little pop. I used Mod Podge to attach the ribbon instead of hot glue because the hot glue would have came through the ribbon. After the ribbon was attached to the front, I turned the chalkboard over and hot glued the ends to the back. I think this is the cutest little Valentine's chalkboard, and the ribbon was the perfect choice. Let me know what you think in the comment. Hey y'all, it's Dawn, and I'm so glad you're back. I've got another fun, budget-friendly DIY video for you today. I used some handmade pink chalk paint to paint the top book. I'll also leave a link to that video in the description. I just love this pink color. I think it's perfect for Valentine's. I painted the top book only and tried to get as little paint as possible on the bottom book. I wanted my books to be 2 different colors. After painting the books, I used my hot air gun to dry the paint quicker. I applied a second layer of paint and used my hot air gun again to dry the paint. Next, I used a sanding block to rough up the paint and give the book stack a rustic, worn look. I also used my Cricut weeder to remove the paint from between the books. I used rubbing alcohol and a paper towel to remove all the dust from the books. I used my Cricut and cut out the saying, "Love never fails." Using transfer paper, I applied the saying to the spine of the books. I used some of this ribbon I got in the baby shower section at Dollar Tree and wrapped it around the book stack and hot glued it on the back. I then did the same thing with a piece of twine on top of the ribbon. I think the stacked books turned out perfect, and I love it on my tiered tray. Hey y'all, it's Dawn, and I'm so glad you're back. I've got another fun, budget-friendly DIY video for you today. To make the adorable tiered tray sign, I used a wood coaster from Michaels. These are perfect for tiered tray signs, and they stand up on their own. I think I paid like $5 for a pack of 4. I removed the little pads from the bottom because this was the smoothest side. I used my fingers and a glue eraser from Dollar Tree to remove the stickiness under the pads. I then stained the entire wood block with antiquing wax. After I let the wax dry, I used white acrylic paint to paint the entire block and used my hot air gun to dry it quicker. I then used a Dollar Tree sanding block to give the sign a rustic, weathered look. I paid more attention to the sides than I did the front and the back. Once I had the look I wanted, I used some rubbing alcohol and a paper towel to remove all the sand dust from the wood. The rubbing alcohol dries quicker than water, that's why I use it. I found this cute file in a Valentine's bundle from Design Bundles and thought it would be cute on this little sign. Instead of using regular vinyl, I decided to use black flocked HTV vinyl and red glitter HTV vinyl. I was wanting a different feel for the sign. After using my Cricut to size and cut the HTV, I placed the black arrows on the block first and centered it. I then used my iron and a thin piece of fabric to set the vinyl. When I pulled up the backing, it left some of the flocking on the wood. I used my glue eraser again to remove the excess flocking. I then laid the letters, centering them around the arrows. And did the same thing with the iron. The tiered tray sign turned out so stinking cute. I'm glad I used the HTV. It gave the little wood sign a little extra texture. I used 10mm and 12mm beads to create the garland. I strung them onto a piece of string and took them outside and painted them. While the beads dried, I painted this little mason jar shaped tag with the same homemade chalk paint I used on the book stack. I also roughed up the tag the same way I had on the books. I used this SVG file from Design Bundles and sized, cut, and weeded it. I used transfer paper to apply the vinyl onto the tag. I used some red HTV for the hearts in the back of the truck. After aligning the hearts up with the truck, I used my iron to set the HTV and to melt the vinyl into the cracks and crevices of the wood tag. I used matte Mod Podge to seal the tag and give it a finished look. To string the beads, I used a collapsible eye needle I picked up in the bead section of Michael's. I continued stringing the beads until I had used all of them for the garland. I slid one end of the string through the hole of the tag and tied a knot to hold the tag into place. I left a longer piece of string hanging after I tied the tag on because I wanted to add a tassel to the ends of the garland, and I would need the string to do that. For the tassel, I used ribbon and twine. I cut all the pieces about the same length. I then stacked them up and used a piece of string to tie them in the middle. I then used a longer piece of twine, added a dab of hot glue to the tassel, and wrapped the twine around the top until I liked the way it looked. I used another dab of hot glue at the bottom and trimmed the twine. I then used the string from the garland and tag and tied it to the string from the tassel. I used a small dab of glue to make sure the knot didn't come undone, and then cut off the excess string. I did the same thing on the other end of the garland using the same ribbon and twine. Next, I trimmed both tassels and unraveled a couple of pieces of the twine on each end. And just look at how sweet this garland turned out. I used a couple of donuts out of this set I got from Dollar Tree and some paper cupcake holders. I simply placed the donuts in the bottom of the cupcake holders. I used my caulk again to create the frosting on top of the cupcakes. I filled in the center hole of each donut first. I then started applying the caulk like you would with frosting onto a cupcake. Once I had both cupcakes covered, I began decorating them. I used some pink foam beads, pink and purple glass beads, and the little foam Valentine stickers from Dollar Tree. While the caulk was drying, I realized the paper was starting to flatten out because of the weight of the caulk. I used a couple of these little red bowls from Dollar Tree and placed the cupcakes in them until the caulk was dry. That seemed to have fixed the problem. And just look at how stinking cute these little cupcakes turned out. And they are the perfect size for that Valentine's tier tray. I used 3 foam dice from Dollar Tree and some red balloons. I cut the neck off of the balloon and then stretched the balloon over the dice. I loved using the red balloons because I only had to put 1 balloon on each dice. I have found with white balloons, you have to use 3 or 4 to cover the markings on the dice. The balloons had a white chalky substance on them, so I sprayed a paper towel with rubbing alcohol and wiped the balloons. I then used a lint-free cloth to wipe them down to remove any lint or dust, making sure I wiped all the sides. I created this little cut file using Inkscape. I used transfer tape and applied the vinyl to all sides of the dice. I made sure the heart was on the bottom of each dice to cover up where I had to cut the balloon. And just look at how stinking cute the dice turned out. I love them. I picked up this cute Valentine scarf, kids' pair of socks, and had the mop head in my stash. I needed something to make the gnome out of, and the only thing I could find was a small can of chili. So I used it as my base. I placed the can into one of the socks. I could still see the label on the can, so I added the other sock, and that fixed the problem. I wanted to use the string from the mop for the beard. I used a piece of cardstock and cut it down. I cut several pieces of the mop and glued them to the cardstock. After I had added 2 layers of the mop string, I glued the cardstock onto the sock to create the gnome's beard. I used a small piece of twine and tied the top sock just to hold the sock in place. For his hat, I used this Valentine scarf from Dollar Tree and cut it in half. It is a very thin material, so I had to wrap it around the gnome's head several times. To attach the scarf, I would put some glue on the edge of the scarf and roll the can onto the glue. I did this with all of the scarf. For his nose, I used a large red glitter foam ball I got from Dollar Tree and glued it in the center of the beard. I also had some felt stickers and decided to use a white one on the center lower part of the hat. I removed the backing and just stuck it in place. I wanted the hat to stand up. I used 2 pipe cleaners, folded them in half, and twisted them together. I wish I would have thought of this before I glued the hat on. It would have been so much easier. I worked my way down from the top of the hat to the edge of the can. Once I found the edge, I used some hot glue and stuck the pipe cleaner into the glue. I placed the second one directly across from the first. And then I did the same thing to the ones on the side. By doing this, my hat had a way to stand up. I moved the layers of the hat back up the pipe cleaner and used a small piece of twine at the top to hold all the fabric in place. I then decided to trim and shape the beard using my scissors. And just look at how stinking adorable the little gnome turned out. I used this $5 tea set from Family Dollar. I looked for one at Dollar Tree and couldn't find one. All I really needed out of this whole set was the little teacups. So if you can find kid-sized teacups at Dollar Tree, I would recommend just using them. I used a Dollar Tree sanding block to rough up the outside of the plastic so my paint would stick. I then took the teacups outside and spray painted them with white spray paint. I found these adorable faces and chocolate drippings on design bundles. I'll leave links to both of these in the description. I used my Cricut to size them and cut them out. I painted the rim of the cup and the front with Mod Podge and dried it with my hot air gun. This way I knew the chocolate dripping and the faces would both adhere correctly to the plastic. I didn't use transfer paper for the chocolate. I simply removed it from the vinyl backing and applied it to the rim of the cup. I did try using transfer paper, but it just didn't work right. I used transfer tape and layered the face on the transfer tape and then applied it to the front of the cup. I used half a round floral foam ball in the bottom of the cup to help hold up the caulk. I cut the caulking tube at an angle and started applying it to the mug. Once the caulk was at a good level, I used some colorful foam beads, some pink and purple glass beads, a foam Valentine heart, and a cut-off paper straw, all from Dollar Tree, to decorate the top. I just love the way this little mug turned out. It's the perfect size for a tiered tray, and it's just so stinking cute. Please take a second to like this video and leave me a comment. This really helps my channel to grow so others just like yourself can find me. If you just found me, I hope you will join our little family by hitting the subscribe button. If you are already part of the family, thank you so much for your love and support. Y'all are the absolute best. Check out my new Amazon store for craft supply and farmhouse home decor recommendations. All the products I use from Amazon in my videos can be found there. Until next time, happy crafting!